Hello there, and welcome back to my intermediate chess course. Now, I hope you've had a chance to check out the first video on the intermediate section. If you've got any questions, just don't hesitate to ask me, send me an email or whatever. But this week, we're going to be focusing on another topic separate to what we did last time. And I wanted to show you a quick puzzle to begin with, because we're looking at tactics last week a little bit, and how they can be used to take advantage of certain strategic elements in a position. So in this position here, I'm just going to flip the board actually to make it a little easier for you to see. But in this position here, well, we've got an endgame, and I'd like you to try and assess the material situation. So whoever's ahead on material generally has a bit of an advantage. So how many points does black have compared to white? Pause the video and see if you can work that out. Well, let's add these pieces up. So 5, 10, 11, 12. Now notice that we don't count the king, because the king is so important. The king doesn't really have a value. It's so important that we don't really want to count it in this material. If we get checkmated, then that's the end of the game. So we have to make sure that our king is always safe. And we'll probably come to that later in the course. So 12 points versus, well, we have 5 plus 3 is 8, 9, 10. So black is a couple of points ahead. And white is very keen to readdress the balance and to perhaps come up with a trick which will enable them to win back some points or win back material. So some of you might have already seen this little trick here. We've got a nice fork. White is attacking both of black's rooks, and it appears that there's not really a way to defend them both, because if we move our rook across to here, notice that we're still in a fork. And we will still lose 5 points for 3. And that will probably mean that the game will be close to a draw, because we'll have a rook and 2 pawns each. So we need something better. If we're going to win this game as black, we need to find something better which will stop us from losing material, losing pieces. So I'm going to give you a minute or so, perhaps well, as long as you need really, to see if you can come up with a way of saving both of black's rooks. So pause the video now. Okay, so the plan is we do something called a Zwischenschach. And even if you don't know what that means, because it's German, you may know it as an in-between move. Now, an in-between move is something where, let's imagine that white took one of our pieces. Then the automatic reaction would be to take the piece back. But sometimes we can do in-between moves, which is called a Zwischenzug. That's the official name. Or we could do an in-between check, which is called a Zwischenschach. And we need to, in this case, save both our rooks. So the answer to this puzzle is rook to d2 check. Now notice that, okay, well, white could block with his rook, with her rook, but we would then take the rook immediately, so that wouldn't be any good. So I guess white will play this move or something similar, and then okay, suddenly we still have this problem to solve, but we can solve it quite easily by moving this second rook away. Let's say like this. And all of a sudden, we're threatening a skewer. This is when we attack a higher value piece, and behind it is a lower value piece that we may be able to win for free, perhaps in this case. So I'll just show you that one more time. This is a way of getting out of a fork. So it looks like we're in trouble. White attacks 2 of our pieces at the same time. Looks like we're going to lose one of them. We do what's called a Zwischenschach, or an in-between check, in-between move to force the king to move. And then we rescue our second piece as if by magic, and we threaten something separate. Okay. So hopefully that was something that you can put into practice in your own games. Remember, if we're in trouble, we find ourselves in a sticky situation, like looks like we're going to lose one of our pieces, then just bear in mind that it's, we can try these little in-between moves. Okay. Okay, so that's the puzzle. I'm going to move on now to a game that I played very recently against one of my students. And I thought this was particularly useful for you guys. Now, again, it's probably worth just checking material. So when we assess a position from, like, we haven't seen it before, we don't really know what's going on yet, probably the first thing we want to check is material. So this may take you a little longer, but I want you to compare pieces. So for example, we both have a king, we know that. We both have a queen. Can you pause the video and compare pieces to see what the material situation is? Well, let's just check. Okay, we both have a king. We both have a queen. We both have 2 rooks. We both have a knight. We both have 2 bishops. So now we're just coming to the pawns. Now, okay, there's slightly different configurations of pawns. They're slightly differently placed. But notice we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, actually, that was a lot easier than counting the total of the material. So it would take us a long time to say, like, okay, 9 plus 3 plus 5 plus 1. Even if you're very good at maths, it would take you a long time. So better to compare pieces, queen versus queen, rook versus rook, like what I just showed you. Okay, so material is equal. So now we have to think about the position itself. Let's start off with perhaps something like control of the center. Who would you say has greater control of the center if either team does? Now, sometimes you may have a straight fight and it's not clear who has control of the center completely. So who would you say is ahead here? I think it's one of those examples where you're not 100% sure, because I think, okay, white has some control here, but then so does black. So that square is kind of, it's unclear. This square we know is controlled by white because of this pawn, and black doesn't have any attackers. This square here is controlled by 2 of black's pieces. So again, it's clearly black's square. And this square here, well, it's a bit of a mixture. We have two white attackers, and I think we have 3 black attackers. Now that still doesn't mean very much, because although black has got more attackers on this square, the control of the square is still shared, which is quite important. We don't want to be putting our queen on this square. We don't want to do this move, because we'll get taken. So that's important to recognize. So nobody has complete control of the center. It's relatively shared. I think the next thing to consider is something called activity. So I'm talking about, well, whether white and black have developed their pieces already, or whether they need to do that a little bit more. Again, consider who you say would be ahead in this area. Pause the video if you need to. Well, I reckon, to be honest, it's probably white. Notice that white here has perhaps some activity with the rook. The rook can come down here and attack. I would say again that white has castled. That's quite important too. Our king needs to be safe. Black hasn't yet castled. And well, we have got 2 pieces out here. Black has got 3 out, but I would say that arguably we can get this bishop out pretty quickly too. So it's easy for white to develop their pieces. Black still has 3 pieces out, so perhaps this is fairly balanced as well. I think we come to, again, the king's safety, which we've talked about. Again, white has castled, black hasn't. Black will castle pretty soon. Now, it's a fairly balanced position. That's what we can talk. That's what we can say. We can say it's fairly equal. What white needs now is a target, something that white can attack, perhaps which isn't protected by anything. There may be a couple of examples of this, but I'd like us to identify some pieces belonging to black which are not protected. Okay, see if you can identify some pieces and pause the video. Right, I think there actually are 3 pieces belonging to black which are not protected. Number 1 is the bishop. Okay, so a move that we could play would be to simply attack the bishop. That would be okay. It would mean that black's bishop would have to move away, and well, we would probably win time. Time is important in chess because whoever can do things more quickly is more likely to be able to get to the enemy king and do the checkmate first or win material. So if we attack pieces, we gain time and often space. We're getting a little bit of space here too. That's one option. I mean, this pawn here is also unprotected. So we could, in theory, perhaps put our bishop here and then move this pawn up and then attack down here. The one thing I would say about that plan is that it's quite slow. Okay? Notice that it takes us 3 moves to do what we want, and it would take 4 to capture this pawn with our bishop. It would just take 1 move for black to castle and protect the pawn. So that would be an example of a plan which is perhaps a little bit too slow, although it's still a good idea. That's important to recognize. I think, though, there's a 3rd piece here which is not protected. This guy. Now, this pawn on b7 is quite important because it's protecting this knight. So notice that perhaps if we can attack this pawn, then we can also make this knight vulnerable. So the knight, therefore, would be under attack. It would be unprotected. And if we can attack it, then that's really good because we can perhaps win material, or we can force the knight to move. So with that in mind, how would you attack the pawn on b7? Again, pause the video, see if you can work that out. Okay. I mean, I think there's another good move which you may have considered in this position, which we'll come to in a second, and I play this on the following move. But the move that I play here is rook to b1, because it's important to recognize that this is a weakness. We need to attack the weakness. Okay, so I think black is perfectly okay if he defends this pawn like that. That'll work very well. What would happen, do you think, if black played this move? What move could we maybe consider here in order to attack the black knight on c6? Notice that knight's not defended. So pause the video, see if you can work it out. Well, I would consider a move such as moving this knight. So if we do something like this, I don't know, maybe we could move it here. Notice that we're now attacking this knight. We're doing a pin on the knight as well. And this is particularly dangerous. So I don't think that black should really do this move pawn to b6. It looks like a good move because it looks like we're creating a pawn chain. But in fact, it leaves us at the mercy of a discovered attack. We don't want to do that. Instead, black played rook to b8. Okay, if I can get it on the screen. There we go. And I followed up with another aggressive move. Now, we're looking to put more pressure on black's queen side. Okay, so although that pawn is now nicely defended, have a think about the idea that I mentioned earlier. We've got this idea with the bishop cutting through to attack black's knight. So is there a way that we can put more pressure on this knight? Have a think. Okay, I'm going to show you. What about this move? Queen to a4. So currently we're looking at putting pressure here. We're also looking at a possible sacrifice. We may decide to get rid of this pawn. Now, I don't think it would work quite in this situation because black can perhaps take this rook and then cover the king with the rook here. So we wouldn't be winning material just quite, but we'd still be putting pressure. Obviously now black tries to capture, which is perfectly fine. We capture back. We have a very strong setup of pieces here, where this is what's called a focused attack. A focused attack is when we literally focus all of our energy and many of our pieces into attacking the same piece. And this is a really good way to play chess. Identify a weakness and then attack it as much as possible, because it's going to be really hard for your opponent to defend it, as we shall see in this game. So what would happen, do you think, if black played this move? See if you can see what would happen after queen to d7. Well, bad things, basically, is what's going to happen. If we go queen to d7, then we simply take this. Because if black takes back, then he falls foul of a pin. Notice this rook can come down here, the pawn is already moved, and we can take that rook for free. So we win a piece, we win a rook. And if black doesn't take, well, then we win black's queen instead. So that's obviously a really strong move, and black will probably lose this game. So we can't do this. The move that black chose instead was simply to lose a pawn. He castles. And then we can win material by taking the knight and then swapping rooks and then taking this pawn. So we win a pawn in that situation, okay? I'm just going to repeat that very quickly just for the end of the lesson. I'm going to go back to here. So first of all, we identify an undefended piece. We then attack the undefended piece. Black is forced to defend it. We then put pressure. We apply a pin here to this knight. And then all of a sudden, we've got a focused attack on the knight. Black doesn't really have much option here. He has to just simply castle because he didn't castle early enough. And we then win material this way. Okay? I'm going to unshare now, and I hope that was useful to you. You can apply that in your games. Identify undefended pieces. That is really crucial. So you can try that out in your games. Maybe try playing against your family or maybe on Lee Chess and see how that goes. Okay? Catch you next time, I guess. See you soon.